Welcome to the Urban Spokesman. My name is Chris Sanders, and I'm giving micromobility users the news they need to stay up to speed on micromobility and urban infrastructure in New York City and beyond. All right. So today I want to talk about why are renters not adequately represented in our politics. Yes, as you know, well, maybe you don't know, but America is made up of mostly renters, and except the people who represent them, and government is mostly owners. So the ownership class is presiding over the renter class of people in the United States. And Bloomberg, they have this article about it. Let's go through it. All right, homeowners dominate local political leadership. That's bad for renters. Yeah. The tenant mayor is a rare species in U.S. cities, a new study says. Even in places where most residents are renters, elected leaders overwhelmingly own their homes. All right. And you can see here the Baltimore mayor, Brandon Scott, who was elected in 2020. He's a renter. Black guy, renter, good looking. Yeah, a renter. Owners protect owners. We need renters protecting renters. We need people voting, renters voting for other renters so we get better housing politics. All right, let's get to the article. Within an hour of Burhan Azim moving into a new apartment this March, an NBC News crew showed up to take a tour. A month later, his selfie in front of his new front door was featured in Boston Magazine. The place wasn't so special. Azim had a 75 square foot room in a 4-bedroom unit he shared with 3 other roommates in Cambridge, Massachusetts. For a 25-year-old paying $1,000 per month to live in one of the most expensive cities in the country, the circumstances weren't so special either. But Azim wasn't just any mid-20s renter. Elected in 2021, he was the Cambridge City Council's youngest member and one of a handful who don't own their homes. It's really a rare thing to have renters on city council, even in a city like Cambridge, where 65% of the people are renters, said Azim, who was bemused but not surprised by the attention paid to his housing search. Not, it's just, it just is not represented in our politics at all. I mean, good Lord. So pause for a second. It's just not represented in our politics at all. What does that mean? That means you get bad housing policies. You get policies like single family homes, car focused infrastructure, no walkable cities. Like, we need walkable, well-designed cities, not just for climate justice, because it's financially responsible, um, and sustainable in the long term. So back to the article. The overwhelming dominance of homeowners in elective office isn't just a Cambridge phenomenon. It's apparent at every level of U.S. government in every state and city, according to a study published this fall. The researchers identified 10,800 representatives across city halls, state houses, and federal offices in 2019 and cross-referenced their home addresses with tax records. They found that about 93% of U.S. senators, congressional representatives, federal judges, city council members, state senators, state representatives, and governors definitely or likely owned a home. So that means the ownership class is governing over the renter class. So basically, it's like what the founders originally intended when they were designing America is that if you owned a home, then you would be eligible for government. And if you don't own a home outright or own property outright, that you wouldn't be eligible for government. That's what they originally designed. And we can imagine all of the racism and all of those things that come along with that. So, just remember that. So, in another example, in another sample of 1,800 city level office holders, the discrepancy between voters and their electeds was stark. For the 190 municipalities researchers examined, citywide home ownerships were around 50%, while 83% of the mayors owned their residences. Home ownership status. So hold up. Let me back up. So what that means is that rich people are the only people that are trusted to govern. Regular middle class people and poor people are not trusted to govern. They think, oh, you can't govern, you're not could govern. Well, then how are you going to create policy that benefits poor people if you if you are how are you going to create policy that benefits poor and middle class people if the representatives that you work with are all rich and they all have hive mind? They all have, they come from the same background, they're the same socioeconomic status, they're not mixing with the regular people. So let's look at this home ownership status by office category. After analyzing property records associated with more than 10,000 elected officials, researchers found that 93% definitely or likely own their home. So you can see here the senator, like, look at that. 80% probably own their home and maybe own only two, So basically 100%. Basically almost 100% of U.S. senators probably own their home. Same with district court judges. So when they're ruling on renters cases, keep that in mind. U.S. representative, same thing. City council, okay, you have 0.1. So, there's like a slight chance that state representative, governor. Okay, what this tells us is that renters are largely not a part, democratically speaking, of the political discourse, said Catherine Levine Einstein, a Boston University professor who co-authored the study entitled "Who Represents the Renters?" with fellow Boston University academic Maxwell Palmer and Josephine Orenstein, a professor at the University of Georgia, Athens. As dramatic as the national figures are, they are likely an undercount, said Einstein. Some politicians who buy properties under an unknown LLC or who temporarily live in official residences like governor's mansions could not be matched to an owner-occupied property tax record and therefore were left out of the homeowner tally. So that means they're undercounting. So 93% is on the low end. This has a direct impact on the agendas politicians set and what policies they advance. Einstein said, take their approaches to the current housing crisis, which will be pursued with different levels of urgency depending upon the extent to which they are personally experiencing this crisis and are personally understanding it. Einstein was expecting to find geographic variations, maybe cities with larger shares of renters, stronger tenant protections, or denser urban cores would have more elected renters. For instance, in New York City, where about 65% of residents rent their homes, voters elected famous Queens tenant turned House of Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. When Brandon Scott was elected as the mayor of Baltimore in 2020, the 36-year-old city councilman rented a 2-bedroom apartment. Wow. Despite these high-profile exceptions, both young people of color like Azim, researchers found that in city after city, the broader home ownership trend held, even in cities like Miami and Boston, where renters dominate. There aren't really any cities where large numbers of renters have been elected to local or state or federal office, Einstein said. The paper describes 2 bottlenecks that could prevent renter representation. Either fewer renters run or fewer voters are willing to elect them. By analyzing the housing status of city council candidates in California between 2017 and 2018, they found that the former is more likely. So renters less likely to run for city council in California. Homeowners dominate local office in part because they are more likely to run. Homeowners are more likely to run than non-homeowners. I mean, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that's already something. But in Cambridge, Azim says that his experience as a renter has informed what bills he supported, like the one that loosened zoning to allow denser, affordable housing development around the city, which was adopted in 2020, and another that would allow affordable towers to be built even taller in transit-rich areas, which is still being fervently debated. Housing is really popular in a lot of ways, and we know that across multiple surveys and across election results, which at the end of the day is what matters, he said. And yet, when I introduced a new affordable housing extension this season, you get so much negative opposition to every single change. That's right. Well, here's the thing. If you are a homeowner, you are invested a lot of times in keeping things as they are. You are invested in keeping the status quo what it is. You are not invested in other people's struggles, other people's problems, you know. So people have to understand that when they're electing somebody, it matters, you know, the policies they're putting forward, but also, you know, what is their motivation behind the policies? How is the politician benefiting or not benefiting from it? Azim has observed this phenomenon not only among his fellow counselors, but the people who speak at public meetings or send in comment to City Hall. City politics is distorted by who shows up. That is so true. He said in Cambridge that looks like homeowners who are whiter and wealthier than the rest of their neighbors. Yes, so when I go to meetings, you know, community board meetings in New York, city council meetings, you know, the people who show up, they show up to try and add unnecessary red tape to projects, to make developers jump through hoops, because at the end of the day, they're trying to not change anything. If everything is already as you, in theory, want it, then there's no reason to change anything, right? So you are invested in keeping everything rigid and as much as possible because you are benefiting from it, even if everyone else around you is failing as a result of it. Okay, so back to the article. That observation, too, has been borne out by Einstein's past research, which showed that the most engaged constituents on housing issues in the Boston area fit that demographic. Homeowners are more likely to show up to city council meetings and are more likely to oppose new development than champion it. Right. Why would you champion building a new house which would potentially lower the value of your own house or compete for sale against your house if you tried to sell it? So you get less, money when you decide to sell it. Well, because there's, greater supply with the demand held constant means that the price has to go down. So that's the calculation being made. It's a greed scheme. Elected officials are even more out of step with their communities when it comes to where and how they live. Researchers found that homes occupied by local, state, and federal officials were worth an average of 50% more than their zip code's median value. The higher the level of public office, the greater the ratio. Nearly 80% of office holders who owned their houses lived in single-family homes, while only 67% of houses across the country are considered single-family homes. This adds to the disconnect between renters and those that represent them. Political scientists think that your interests will be better reflected by your public representatives and that you're going to have more trust in the democratic processes if there are people who share your background in higher office, said Einstein. So there you go. That's the article. So basically, what you have here is, you know, you have to be rich to get in office. That's basically what this means. You have to already be wealthy enough to have purchased a home and to be elected in office. So there's like a 90% chance you will not be in office if you are a renter. So if you want to get elected, basically what you have to do is first buy a home if you want to be elected to office in the city or in the city government. And people wonder why the housing crisis is out of control, and there's homeless people everywhere in California, in New York, and Austin, and all these places. And people like to say, oh, well, that's California's problem, but it's like California was first. You're next. All the people who couldn't afford it in California are going to move to your neighborhood, and then they are going to afford it, and that's going to drive the price up. And you're next. People don't understand that. What happens in some of these leader states like California and New York, it's going to happen to everybody else like 2, 3, 5 years down the line, and that's what's happening now. So we need more renters to, one, run for office, but two, get elected. We need to elect them. That should be a criteria for electing someone is, one, their housing policy, and two, their transportation policy, and three, like, are they renters? Because people look out for their own interests. Period. End of story. And I like to live in a neighborhood where everyone is being well taken care of. So hopefully you do too. I've been dying to share this story, this data that I found like several months ago, and well, here it is. So in any case, I hope you all are having a wonderful evening. Get involved, with your community boards. Also, we need to be voting in more renters. We need to have, I'm not saying it needs to be exactly the exact representation, but we need more. We need enough so that, people actually have to consider, renters as real people and not as, just someone to use for the vote and then throw them to the side. Or who cares? Oh, if you don't buy a house, then you don't deserve to live in it. You don't deserve to live, or you don't deserve to not be homeless. Like, I think we, there are people like me out there who are like, no, I want the option. I don't want to mow the lawn. I don't want to do that. I don't need endless space. I need some space. I'm just not greedy. I don't need to be greedy with resources, like precious resources like space. Then I got to fill it with stuff, and that costs a whole lot of money, and it's a whole lot of money to maintain. I want simple, efficient lifestyles, relaxing lifestyles. In any case, let me know what you think in the comments. If you have any ideas on this topic or any other topic related to urbanism, transportation, biking, housing. Housing is, always at the top of my mind, as well as, transportation and making New York a better city. So in any case, have a great evening. Have a great night. Ciao, ciao. See you later.